Hello and welcome to another episode of Spray Wash Pro. The subject of today's lesson will be on awnings. Typically, there's three different types of awning materials that we'll encounter. The first is a canvas type material. The second is a hard vinyl or vinyl covered canvas. And the final type material is a metal awning. Another type of awning material you may occasionally encounter is a Sunbrella fabric. These are not typically fully waterproof, so we don't find them used a great deal in awning situations. They're great for keeping the sun off, but not necessarily making an entry waterproof. Now, when it comes to cleaning an awning, one of the most important decisions you'll have to make is, what am I actually cleaning off of this awning? Different areas of the country have different contaminants. Many times you'll have pollen, or you can have an algae and mildew growing on there. Sometimes it might be road grime and dirt from a busy road on an awning. Always inspect your awnings prior to cleaning and make notes of any issues you see there. Make sure to note loose fabric, frayed seams, any areas that have holes in them, because the cleaning could actually exacerbate some of these areas. So you'll want to talk with the building owner or manager about the best way to proceed. A good rule of thumb is that if a material is UV safe, it's also bleach safe. So moderate amounts of sodium hypochlorite are typically not going to hurt an awning. You should always do a test spot in an inconspicuous area to verify this as being true. When it comes to rinsing an awning, though, the stitching that holds a lot of the seams together is not bleach safe. So you'll always want to rinse and over-rinse your awnings. Basically, you can't rinse an awning too much because you want to make sure any leftover bleach is flushed out. And you'll also want to neutralize any bleach as a final step on your awning washes. For an awning with moderate mildew, typically we will use about a 15% total volume of SH, or bleach, plus a nice amount of a soapy degreaser such as EBC or Agent Blue. Using a degreaser in your mix gives the added benefit of taking off any roadside contaminants that might be present. Now, once you've got your mix applied, either via downstreamer or through a direct application pump, it's time to let it dwell for a little while. During the dwell period, you can brush it in using a soft bristled brush. We use something like this. That's the bi-level type brush. This one's made by Unger. There's lots of different models out there you can use. Gently rub your solution onto the awning. Now, if you're cleaning a plastic type awning, one of the heavy PVC coated awnings, typically speaking at this point, you can rinse it off. All the mildew and algae and surface contaminants will be gone. However, if it's a canvas type awning, you might now have to go with a semi-aggressive rinse. Now, when we talk about rinsing, high pressure tips are a no-no. Go ahead and just throw those away. We're going to want to rinse with a Softwash tip. Something like this is a 1/4 meg 25-30. So a 25-degree tip and a 30 orifice. You can actually see in there how wide that orifice is as compared to this yellow tip right there. This is letting a great deal more water through and is not going to have excessive pressure on that fabric. Now, if you're having to do an aggressive rinse, there's two tools that I just showed that can really help you along with this. One is an adjustable tip that will go from 0 degrees to 45 degrees to 90 degrees. And then also a good old-fashioned noodle or extension wand, as it's known. If you don't have one of the noodles, a lot of times just an 8-foot or 6-foot extension on your pressure washing wand will suffice for most awnings. You want to rinse from the top to the bottom. And one of the reasons you want to do a very thorough rinse, just going stripe by stripe by stripe, is that as this fabric gets wet and gets darker, you really won't be able to see what's on there, meaning the dirty stuff kind of disappears. This is especially true with pollen. As it gets wet, it just blends into the fabric. So do a very thorough, systematic rinse at low pressure. You don't want to exceed 1,000 psi at this point, and really if you could be down around 600 psi, it's even better. So do a good flood rinsing just with your wand and just stripe back and forth, drop down 6 inches, stripe back and forth, drop down 6 inches, stripe back and forth until you get to the end of it. That should give a thorough rinse to the awnings. I find one of the most difficult areas to rinse on the awnings is that bottom flap or the bottom fringe that's on the awning, because typically it isn't supported by any of the framework. So whenever you go to rinse that, it'll just want to flap back and forth in the water stream. If you have a helper or an assistant with you, sometimes we'll actually have them grab that with a set of pliers to put some tension on there so we can rinse that flap some. Otherwise, just prepare to get wet as it flaps back and forth. This is another reason you want to use low pressure whenever rinsing, because high pressure, whenever it hits one of those flaps, it can really tear it and cause some damage to the awning. It can also tear the trim work that's there at the bottom of that flap. It can rip that area around. I'll put some pictures of that immediately following this part of the video. In that shot that was just previously shown with the damaged trim is a prime example of why you want to document any issues with these awnings before you start washing it. If you noticed, that shot still had lichen growing on it. It had not been washed yet, so we made sure we took pictures to show the property manager that we didn't actually cause that damage. Their answer to us was, well, go ahead and wash it and we'll trim off any of the edges that we need to, because we'd rather, cut off that white that white trim and have a frayed end than have the lichen growing on there. So that was their solution to the problem. A call that I often get when people are talking about awnings, they worry because they see the fabric start to stretch out as they're washing. This is totally normal. As the fibers get wet, they tend to expand some, so the awnings may droop while you're washing, but as they dry, the fabrics will tighten back up and the awning will go back to looking normal with its normal tightness after it's dried up. So you don't have to worry whenever you see them loosen up that you've caused any kind of damage on that. The angle that the awning is set at and the depth of the awning will have a lot to do whether you have to get on a ladder or not. We find that typically speaking, most awnings we're not having to use a ladder at all. Between our Softwash booster pump or a pressure washer with an extension pole, that we're able to wash these from the ground. You'll see a couple of pictures here of us working from a ladder on there if the awning is particularly shallow or very deep. When you're working on a ladder, one of the first things you need to check is, can this framework actually support a ladder leaned up against it? If it can't, then you'll need to work from a step ladder or an A-frame type ladder and not lean an extension ladder up against the framework. Second off, whenever you're working from a ladder, it's always a great idea to have a second person there on the job site with you, footing the ladder or being there in case of a slip and fall on there. It's just a really good habit to get into. Ladder work, I believe, should always have a second person present. So to recap what we've learned about awnings. 1, most of these fabrics are going to be bleach safe. It's a pretty safe bet that if something is UV safe, then it's also going to be bleach safe. But you should always do a test area in an inconspicuous area just to make sure. We also always want to rinse at a very low pressure. As low a pressure that will get the job done. High pressure, 1500 psi or greater, is really a no-no with these awnings. It can cause damage. We want to always note any damage that's already present on the awnings. Look for little pinholes where you can see light through it. I know a lot of our shopping center work is done at night, but whenever you're looking at these awnings, it's a great idea to go by there during the daylight, during the sunlight, to be able to check on them just to make sure. So we've got the low pressure rinse, and then we always like to neutralize at the end. We like to use Agent Halt at Spray Wash Exterior Cleaning. It's just our neutralizer of choice, but there are other neutralizers out there on the market. And it's just one extra thing you can tell your customer that you've done to ensure the safety of the property that you've washed for them. Another thing too, always practice responsible chemical usage. Earlier in this video, we talked about a 10 to a 15% total volume of SH. If you can get away with less, use less. You're much better off to start off with a lower concentration than work your way up. Some of the vinyl or the PVC awnings or the metal awnings, the harder fabrics, can actually oxidize in bright sunlight, or they're already oxidized, and whenever you clean off the mildew and the dirt on there, you see the oxidation. So you don't want to do anything like a strong, harsh chemical to cause or exacerbate the oxidation that's on there. The good news is if you come across oxidized awnings, you can repair those with a gutter butter or some other type of oxidation removing chemical. But this is something you want to point out again to the property manager if you see any oxidation on there before you start washing. Hey, thank you so much for your membership in Spray Wash Pro, and thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email. The address will be listed right at the end of this video. Have a great day and wash on.